I'm Ingrid Burke, Friedman, Features Editor, JURIST News. Today, as part of our ongoing coverage of the Ukraine conflict, I will be interviewing Professor David Crane of Syracuse University School of Law. Professor Crane formerly served as Chief Prosecutor at the Special Court for Sierra Leone, a UN tribunal set up to prosecute war crimes related to the Blood Diamond conflicts of the 90s in Sierra Leone. In that context, Professor Crane has the rare distinction of having prosecuted a standing president for war crimes. His organization, the Global Accountability Network's Ukrainian Task Force, has compiled a massive dossier of alleged war crimes and acts of aggression committed by Russian forces, allegedly, in Ukraine. Today, we discuss some of the parallels between Sierra Leone and Ukraine and how the international community might go about prosecuting Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Thank you for allowing me to talk about this very, very critical time and moment in history. My background is largely in government service and public service. I spent over 30 years in the U.S. federal government before I was given the privilege and asked by Kofi Annan, with the concurrence of the Security Council, to be the founding chief prosecutor of the world's first international hybrid war crimes tribunal to seek justice for the murder, rape, maiming, and mutilation over 1.2 million West Africans, particularly Sierra Leoneans, during a terrible 10 years in the 1990s. And so I was given that privilege, and I accepted that privilege and went to West Africa to essentially break up and take down those who were involved in what is commonly known as the Blood Diamond story, to include, for the first time in the modern era, a sitting president of a country, President Charles Taylor of Liberia. And so my mandate was to prosecute those who bore the greatest responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And so we successfully did that and completed our work and came back to the United States. But the importance of the Special Court for Sierra Leone showed that the United Nations and another country can join together and seek justice for victims of atrocity, that the mandate, greatest responsibility, was a workable mandate and led to the success, the tremendous success of the UN Special Court for Sierra Leone. And also, this is important, one of the key decisions by our appellate chamber is that a head of state who commits international crimes while sitting as a head of state is not immune from those international crimes. That's a huge decision that forever allows now the international community to prosecute heads of state who commit international crimes such as aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And prosecutor versus Taylor is the cornerstone by which we can do that. And it's going to be very, very important to us as we seek methodologies to hold Vladimir Putin accountable for his international crimes.
And aside from the jurisdictional issue of whether you could prosecute a sitting head of state, what were some of the other logistical issues that came with attempting to prosecute a sitting president? And how do you think that might factor into efforts to prosecute Vladimir Putin?
Well, at the end of the day, an international war crimes tribunal is a creature of politics. The bright red thread of atrocity accountability and setting up justice mechanisms is politics. And so it'll be a political decision when the world decides to do something about Vladimir Putin and hand him over to an appropriate court. And that was really the main challenge that I had when not only investigating and indicting and taking down President Charles Taylor, but is to get the world to politically come to the same conclusion and develop methodologies by which they did hand over Charles Taylor 2 years later after I indicted him for a fair and open trial before the people of Sierra Leone. And that did happen. Once I got my prosecutorial plan in place and my wonderful people working in court seeking justice for the people of Sierra Leone, I spent most of my time, 70% of my time, traveling the world, building up a political consensus by which we could hand Charles Taylor over to our court so we could fairly try him.
And to what extent did that require political will within Liberia, where he was sitting president, as opposed to just international political will? I realize those are two very different issues. So how much play-in did you need from Liberia itself?
Well, once I indicted President Charles Taylor, he was removed from power and put in house arrest in Calabar, Nigeria. So he was actually removed from the physical aspects of Liberia. But he had also destroyed a lot of Liberia as well while he was president. So the populace was sensitive and angry with him and wanted justice as well. So that's going to be slightly different than when we take on Vladimir Putin, which can be done because we don't have that kind of will by the people of Russia to hand him over. But again, these circumstances change, politics change. He's a dictator, he's a thug, he's a war criminal. And the people of Russia, once they find the true facts, will certainly consider, and again, this is the political dynamic that I've mentioned, is that someday a political dynamic will happen by which the Russian people will hand him over to a fair and open trial somewhere.
And that, when it comes to that, obviously a key issue is that there's the information space in Russia has largely been sort of choked off. You see the shuttering of independent news sites, sort of information coming out of Ukraine, especially, for example, Bucha, where you're seeing photos and video footage of terrible atrocities basically being dismissed as fake news within Russia. Do you think that will be a key aspect ultimately to bringing Vladimir Putin to justice and opening up of the information space within Russia so people can see what's actually happening?
Well, again, all dictators and thugs, to include Putin, try to control the information, what information that is being put out to their citizens. In large measure, that can be shut down, but it can't be completely shut down in this day and age of social media. The Russian people have the capability, if they have the courage enough to open up a particular app or a particular device and get this information. The Russian people do know. The Russian people have been under the thumb of dictators pretty much their entire existence. So they know how to play the game. They know how to be very, very careful. They're not going to openly look at this, but the people of Russia, and they're not going to admit that they know what's going on, but the people of Russia do know what's going on. So they mouth the right words and declare their allegiance to Mother Russia and to Putin, but in reality, there's discussions going on behind doors and as to what happens. So again, you just in this day and age, dictators can't turn off the spigot entirely.
And with regard to the images that they're trying so hard to stifle right now, and the reports coming out of the region, I know you and your team conducted research based on open source data, and it was from February 24th to April 1st, correct? That you searched for data of war crimes and atrocities.
Yes, our important white paper, the first comprehensive report on Russian war crimes in the Ukraine, used all sources of methodologies of getting that information, and we didn't, and we just don't take it from the press, so to speak. Anything that is in that white paper is at least double sourced. In other words, we just didn't mouth and regurgitate information coming out from the press, but actually we had to physically confirm the events that it took place, particularly in our crime-based matrix, which lists a series of horrific events. So again, yes, it's in this day and age with the World Wide Web, the internet, social media, and stuff. It can be done, even though sometimes you're not physically standing there to actually confirm war crimes and crimes against humanity being committed. So we used all the techniques, all of the technology necessary in order to confirm what's going on in Ukraine, and it truly is a series of international crimes, aggression, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. So I'm very, very confident in our white paper that just came out yesterday that the data is confirmed, it's valid, and one could actually prosecute on the data that's within the white paper.
And we will be linking to the white paper with this interview. And in it, you do lay out some serious atrocities, and you do based on your experience as a prosecutor, explain well how they can be prosecuted. Based on you've obviously worked on many atrocities throughout the course of your career in international criminal law. What are some of the worst or most disturbing atrocities that you've uncovered with your team for this white paper?
What is very apparent, and obviously your listeners can understand this, so what is very apparent is just the clear violation of intentionally targeting civilians, which is a clear war crime and a crime against humanity. The laws of armed conflict specifically prohibit the intentional targeting of civilians. So throughout this conflict, the Russian army, which was defeated in battle and could not accomplish their mission, turned to killing civilians and destroying civilian properties, and also intentionally targeting other protected places such as hospitals. So this was medieval warfare, particularly once the Russian army realized that they were going to fail in their mission, that they just went ahead and began to just destroy anything and everything around them. That is just barbarism and exactly the type of conduct that international law, particularly the laws of armed conflict, were designed to prohibit. The laws of armed conflict being the Geneva Conventions as part of those bodies of laws. And again, so the thing that really jumps out at you, and it was very similar to what took place in West Africa, was just the wanton killing of civilians just to terrorize. And we took down President Charles Taylor, for that same policy. And in the future, we will take down Vladimir Putin for that very same policy and his commanders.
And you do go into various individuals beyond Vladimir Putin who you view as culpable for the crimes that are happening there. Who are some of the most egregious actors that you're seeing on the Russian side?
Well, the center point of all this is President Vladimir Putin, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And then those who implement his decisions are also just as culpable. You know, within international criminal law, within laws of armed conflict, we have this concept of command responsibility, which means that the individuals who direct these types of international crimes are individually criminally responsible for each and every act that their armed forces are perpetrating against, for example, the people of Ukraine. Just like I did with President Charles Taylor in Liberia, I charged him as being individually criminally responsible for the murder, rape, maiming, and mutilation of over 1.2 million human beings. And so, that's the kind of attack that if I was prosecutor of a new mechanism that I would take against Vladimir Putin. So as you look at his inner circle, those who affect the decisions by Putin, and then you move it back out down to the commanders, the senior commanders in the field, we call that those who bear the greatest responsibility. And within the white paper, in the appendix, you will see a list of those individuals who have potential criminal liability for executing the aggression by President Vladimir Putin.
And if you were in a position, again, to be able to prosecute a sitting president and his top commanders, what steps would be necessary in order to make it happen? Just hypothetically, say you were given that position today, what would be your next steps? How would you move forward?
Well, this is all beginning to evolve now, and as the world begins to come together to think about, all right, what are the next steps as far as prosecuting Vladimir Putin and his commanders? The International Criminal Court rightfully has opened a preliminary investigation under their rules of procedure to investigate the war crimes and crimes against humanity, which they have jurisdiction over. But there is a piece of this that is missing because the International Criminal Court, for obviously procedural issues, cannot prosecute the crime of aggression. And so that will have to be dealt with because, again, this is what really started the whole thing, was this clear act of aggression of the Russian Federation invading Ukraine. And so right now there is discussions around the world by by myself and many others thinking about using the Special Court for Sierra Leone, the world's first hybrid international war crimes tribunal, to create a special court for Ukraine, the second hybrid international war crimes tribunal created by the UN General Assembly, giving the Secretary General the authority to negotiate a treaty between the United Nations and the Ukraine, very similar to what we did in West Africa, with the mandate of prosecuting those who bear the greatest responsibility for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. So you'd have two parallel international courts working together to capture the entire gravamen of what has taken place, of the offenses that have taken place in Ukraine, and doing just that. So that's what's going to be happening in a general sense. And then once you take that mandate of prosecuting those who bear the greatest responsibility for the crime of aggression in Ukraine, then you begin to develop putting together a general strategy, a milestone of how you're going to do that, which I did in West Africa. And then you begin to bring on people who will support those various phases of your general strategy, while at the same time building a prosecutorial strategy and getting your investigators started in compiling data and information, turning it into criminal information and eventually evidence. It's really important, for our listeners to understand is that these are courts of law, and so the rules of procedure and evidence are there. And so we just can't take all this data that we see and then just put it into court. The rules of evidence require authenticity as well as relevance to make it allow it to be put into court. So these are also considerations as you move forward. We've done it before. That's the key in here. I think we've done this before. We've created a type of court that could be used to actually account for the aggression. And we actually did it based on the fact that we were going to take down a head of state. We've got the experience, we've got the jurisprudence, and we have the rules of procedure and evidence to clearly set up a special court for Ukraine. And I think very, very quickly, so that we could move forward, because I think setting up the court would be a great deterrent for Vladimir Putin. And it would also send, more importantly, a signal to the people of Ukraine that he's no longer a legitimate head of the Russian Federation. That happened when President Biden and the European Union declared that he's a war criminal. He is no longer a legitimate head of state and should be dealt with like that. And eventually the Russian people will begin to pick up on this. And again, creating that political circumstance by which we can have him removed and handed over to an appropriate court.
And my final question, when it comes to establishing a special court like this, how much would the fact that the Security Council, how much would the veto, China and Russia's veto power within the Security Council stymie that plan?
Well, the Security Council is irrelevant these days because China and Russia, the two world's greatest perpetrators of international crimes, do have the power to veto it. So we just ignore it. We go to special circumstances and go to the General Assembly. If you'll note, that's what I said. So it'll be, and the General Assembly has already done this in creating mechanisms for Syria and Myanmar, but also the General Assembly has come together, 141 nations come together to condemn the invasion and also have condemned the human rights violations. So there is over 75% of the world's member states of the United Nations already condemning. So the political will is there, as I've mentioned, and the ability to then give the Secretary General the authority to negotiate with the Ukrainian government to create the special court for Ukraine regarding the crime of aggression.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will be sure to link the white paper below.
It's been my pleasure, and let's continue our work because it has to be done. The world's strongmen around the world are watching this. If we don't do anything related to Vladimir Putin and his crimes, they're like crocodiles. They're just sitting there. It's going to be a very, very difficult world indeed, unless we do something about Vladimir Putin.